so is because it gives me an opportunity once again to thank Barbara McMartin and her committee for the extraordinary work that they have done. Barbara, thank you. It's been terrific. This never would have happened without you. Lynn, thank you. All of you who worked on this community, on our infrastructure and the need to create investment in New York State and to promote additional economic opportunity for our citizens. But this governor has always recognized the nexus between a strong, healthy economy and a strong, healthy... Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I encourage the applause. It's a good way to deal with the black flies, actually. Thank you very much, Maurice Hinchy. Before I say anything else, let me say that indeed Barbara McMartin, when first she met me here just a few minutes ago on the way to the podium, said that the black flies were here and welcomed by her in order to keep the speeches short. She really did say that. And she said it directly to me, funded by 211 legislators. Years and years. And so I can survive a few black flies. The truth is that not all of the legislators are as enlightened, as bright, as compassionate, as progressive, as intelligent, as fair as Maurice Hinchy. The second reason, maybe more, I'm going to say more about Maurice, so save that black fly attack for a few moments. The second reason the speech is not going to be shorter than I intended is that I came to do more than simply share this wonderful celebration with you, but to say some things that I think are significant about the park, its past, and its future, that are significant politically, and that are significant really about the future of the park, the challenges that we face in maintaining its beauty while being fair to its people, and the opportunities that lie immediately ahead of us if we are not foolish enough to overlook them. Entire state. And the recognition as well of our obligation to those who will come after us. The room reminds us of that. Grand scheme of things, difficult here not to admire the harmony of nature, a harmony that eludes us so frequently in our personal and in our political lives amid the hundreds of daily, concrete, distracting concerns. And the park, like the room, reminds us of what stewardship means. Make one thing very clear. The temptation here is to avoid this challenge. That's the temptation for all politicians, and that's the temptation for the citizens. It's complicated, it's difficult. Someone will be unhappy when you make the ultimate compromise. And so duck it, don't think of it, maybe it will go away. Hear this, one thing should be very clear to you. No matter what we do or do not do, something will happen as a result. You cannot take a pass on this situation. There is no freezing of the status quo. If we do nothing, because one or a few legislators or a lot of legislators say no to everything that's proposed and refuse to negotiate, if we do nothing, for any reason, something bad will happen.
Is with us today, so we can thank him in person. To the Adirondack Park Agency, and Chairman Cole is here with members Arthur Savage and John Collins. Organizations such as the Association for the Protection of the Adirondacks, the Adirondack Mountain Club, and Adirondack Council have helped the committee from the start. Publications and newspapers from the Adirondack Daily Enterprise to Adirondack Life have helped us promote the Centennial. Adirondack does you. And I want to say a special thanks to Assemblyman Hinchy for all the work he's done, because we would not be here without him for this celebration. Anyway. Now, let's all truly enjoy this incredibly beautiful.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It is a wonderful pleasure for me to be here with you this afternoon. One of the reasons it is so is because it gives me an opportunity once again to thank Barbara McMartin and her committee for the extraordinary work that they have done. Barbara, thank you. It's been terrific. This never would have happened without you. Lynn, thank you for all that you've done. All of the people who worked on this committee, all of the people who worked on this committee are the ones who should get the credit and our accolades for the energy and dedication that they committed to this project. It's always a pleasure to introduce the governor of the state of New York, and it is my pleasure to do so once again this afternoon. We live in difficult times because of the circumstances of our economy nationally. Those circumstances have forced governors from Maine to California to focus their energy and attention on economic priorities, on job development and economic opportunity for their citizens. The governor of New York State has had to do that as well. That's what the new New York program, his idea, is all about. There are other programs that the governor is promoting this year to focus attention on our infrastructure and the need to create investment in New York State and to promote additional economic opportunity for our citizens. But this governor has always recognized the nexus between a strong, healthy economy and a strong, healthy, vibrant environment. From the very first days of his administration, that recognition has been apparent. I will just cite two examples. In the early days of his administration, his first administration, he signed into law the first acid rain control law in the country. It was landmark legislation upon which other states looked for precedents, even the federal government. And very important, obviously, to the Adirondacks. Just a few weeks ago, he put the final mark of approval on the Hudson River Valley Greenway, a program of extraordinary importance to protect and preserve the quality of the environment in the Hudson River Valley. And in between, he has offered more resources for more environmental programs than any other governor in the history of this state. Governor Cuomo, for all that you are doing, for all that you have done, and all that you will do for the people, the family of the state of New York, we thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the governor of the state of New York, Mario M. Cuomo.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I encourage the applause. It's a good way to deal with the black flies, actually, you know. Thank you very much, Maurice Hinchey. Before I say anything else, let me say that indeed Barbara McMartin, when first she met me here just a few minutes ago on the way to the podium, said that the black flies were here and welcomed by her in order to keep the speeches short. She really did say that, and she said it directly to me, I want you to know. And normally I would respond to that kind of importuning and limit the speech. Two things I want to say on that subject, however. The black flies don't have the same effect on me that they have on you. I have been giving speeches in Albany, surrounded by 211 legislators for years and years. And so I can survive a few black flies. The truth is that not all the legislators are as enlightened, as bright, as compassionate, as progressive, as intelligent, as fair as Maurice Hinchey. The second reason, maybe more, I'm going to say more about Maurice, so save that black fly attack for a few moments. The second reason the speech is not going to be shorter than I intended is that I came to do more than simply share this wonderful celebration with you, but to say some things that I think are significant about the park, its past, and its future, that are significant politically, and that are significant really about the future of the park, the challenges that we face in maintaining its beauty while being fair to its people, and the opportunities that lie immediately ahead of us if we are not foolish enough to overlook them. But let me first greet all the people who are here on the dais. I add to Maurice's words of commendation my own to Barbara. I know what an immense task it was when first she undertook it, and how marvelously well she and Lynn and all the volunteers have done it. And I congratulate her on behalf of all the people of the state of New York, because what she's doing here is significant to all the people of this great state. So Barbara, thank you. Lynn, all the volunteers. Dick Perdue, a great town supervisor. Bill Donnellan, about whom we will say more in a few minutes, the chairman and CEO of Niagara Mohawk. My own great commissioner, Tom Jorling, and my old friend, and the chairman who said when first he came into state service, look, I'll do anything you need me for, boss, any hard task. And I found a whole series of them for him. And he seemed to deal with them with such aplomb and unflappability that it annoyed me. I thought that he should show a little more of the strain, the way the rest of us did. And so I searched around and dug to the bottom of the pile and said, let me find a job where no possibility of peace and composure would remain. And I did, and I put him in at the APA, and he's now its chairman. And he has done a great job. It has never been fully appreciated by the people with whom he worked because it can't be in the nature of the jurisdiction. It's a jurisdiction that from its very design was apt to disconcert and irritate a lot of people. There is no way around it. There is no way to do what he has to do and what that vehicle has to do without making some people unhappy. I knew it when I put him in, and he knew it too. And he has done a wonderful job, as he has done at everything he's ever put his hand to for the people of the state or the people of his congregation. Woody Cole. Maurice referred to how difficult it has been in recent years to be a governor or a citizen of this state or country. We have been in the midst of a very difficult recession. And I think back, and when I first began, and Maurice was already a well-established figure in the Assembly, the conscience of the Assembly and the Senate and the state government when it comes to the environment. I say that, and it is not hyperbole, it is not exaggeration for the sake of graciousness. He is indeed the conscience of the whole state government when it comes to the environment. No force, no poll, no quick wave of popularity or lack of popularity changes the way he feels about the environment and the ultimate significance he attaches to it, as he should. And he is there relentlessly, sometimes ruthlessly, making his point. And he was there when I first became governor, elected in 1982, and ironically there was a recession then. So I have now lived through two great recessions. The first one was not as tough on the state or the country as this one is. I look back, however, on that governorship, and I can say to you in all candor that it has been such a high privilege to be governor that I doubt that I will ever live long enough to earn the privilege or be able to find the words to express my gratitude for it. I feel that every day of my life as governor, but you feel it in a very special way when you come to the Adirondacks. You really do. I mean, just flying over them on the way here from Albany today. And I've done it probably more than any human being that has ever lived. You think about that. I've been in public service now since 1975. The only person who I can think of who had a similar stretch with a similar opportunity was Malcolm Wilson, who was in the Assembly and the Senate and was a great, great lieutenant governor and is a great public servant and is with us still. But Malcolm would not fly. And so he never had the chance to go up in a small plane or a helicopter. I've been doing that for all the time I've been in public service, since I was Secretary of State. The first assignment I had was the Adirondacks, Ray Brook, the Olympics, Bob McKean, the great argument with the environmentalists over the white face, and what do you do with a ski slope, and how do you handle it, and won't it be ugly forever? And I must tell you that every time you come to the Adirondacks and you think of this place as part of the state of New York, you are impacted again by what an incredible, beautiful thing it is, what a treasure, what a gift from God to instruct us, to delight us, to inspire us. And you're reminded that that's part of your mission too as governor, to share in that great gift and to see to it that the people of the state are not allowed through inadvertence or oversight to ignore it or, God forbid, to abuse it. And so my gratitude to Barbara and to all the committee for putting together this centennial. because the Centennial provides us with a special opportunity to visit the Adirondacks again, if not in person, as those fortunate enough to be here have done, to visit it in our minds and in our judgments, to recall what a great treasure it is and to see what we do about it in the future. I want to congratulate, too, Craig Gilbourne, who deserves credit and has our gratitude for all he's done to preserve and enrich the legacy of the Adirondacks with the museum. There are two places in our state, two very different places, that always seem to prompt me, and I'm sure others, to reflect on principles or values, or to use an old-fashioned word, virtues, that should be central to our public life together as a people. Two places. One is a room, a stunning turn-of-the-century, mahogany-covered, stained glass room in the Capitol building in Albany called the Executive Chamber. It's the official governor's office, so grand that I use it only for ceremonial occasions. And the other is the magnificent Adirondack Park. The room and the park may seem worlds apart. One the work of a great 19th century architect, the other the dazzling work of nature's designer. They are both expressions of the Gilded Age, the several decades after the Civil War. The room in Albany was finished in 1881. The park, whose origins stretch back millennia, was designed and protected in 1892, 100 years ago, the anniversary that brings us all together here at the museum. But both places, the park and the room, move one to the same kinds of reflections. When I greet visitors in the Executive Chamber, especially when their school children come to visit, I explain to them the architectural details of the room and the careful work we undertook to restore it to its original splendor after it had suffered decades of neglect and abuse. I remind them of names from history, the names of those who governed from that room, people like Theodore Roosevelt, Al Smith, Franklin Roosevelt, Nelson Rockefeller. But most of all, I tell them that for me, and I hope for them, the room can instruct us in important, basic lessons. A lesson in humility, in the acknowledgement that the room was there long before we came upon the scene and will be there long after we leave it. A lesson in stewardship, in recognizing our debt to all of those who came before us, those who built what we have in this state at great price, who overcame war and depression and epidemics and natural disasters, and handed on to us for safekeeping and enrichment a state that they made the Empire State. And the recognition as well of our obligation to those who will come after us. The room reminds us of that. And aren't those the same lessons, the same reflections that this park offers us, particularly on this Centennial Day? It's difficult not to be humble in this place, in this park. It's difficult to be arrogant about one's place in the grand scheme of things. Difficult here not to admire the harmony of nature, a harmony that eludes us so frequently in our personal and in our political lives amid the hundreds of daily, concrete, distracting concerns. And the park, like the room, reminds us of what stewardship means. Here in this museum, we're reminded of the debt we owe to those who came before us, names from history that you're all so familiar with. Ebenezer Emmons, Verplanck Colvin, and John Cheney, for example. And there are other names of people whose lives and work offer visible, living proof of what stewardship means right here in the Adirondacks. People like Paul Jameson, Paul Schaefer, Raina Brock. The park also reminds us of obligations to those who will come after us, those not yet born, those we will never know, and those who will never know us, but who will know this beauty or not know this beauty, depending upon what we do or fail to do. And so the park and the room tell us in different ways the same thing, point us toward the same values, ask of us the same virtues, a dedication to something larger than ourselves, gratitude to those who passed on to us what we have, a commitment to stewardship, to leaving for those who come after us something better, or at least something as good, acknowledgement that our individual interests are not the important thing, that they must be harmonized with the interest of others, and all of them harmonized with the public interest. And aren't those the virtues that can save us? Save us as individuals, save us as a state, save us even as a nation. Aren't they the things the world needs so badly today? And we have them right here in the park. The park and the room should provide, I think, the framework within which we operate as we embark on the park's second 100 years. And please listen to me. We will need a strong framework because very real concerns press us for answers now, press us for practical solutions, for realistic plans right now. The overarching question is this: how do we, all at the same time, accomplish the following? Make reasonable accommodations to the demands of nature, to the rights of a world of possible visitors, and to the needs of the 130,000 individuals or so who live, work, raise their families, and do business in the park. Those who love the park not merely as occasional or even accidental tourists, but as native Adirondackers. I could take any part of that litany and do it easily. But that's not our challenge. We have to do it all. We have to accommodate all of those interests. And that is a difficult challenge. How do we preserve this magnificent heritage for the state as a whole, all 18 million of us, and still give the residents of the park a fair and useful voice in determining their own future? Now let me make one thing very clear. The temptation here is to avoid this challenge. That's the temptation for all politicians, and that's the temptation for the citizens. It's complicated, it's difficult. Someone will be unhappy when you make the ultimate compromise. And so duck it, don't think of it, maybe it will go away. Hear this. One thing should be very clear to you. No matter what we do or do not do, something will happen as a result. You cannot take a pass on this situation. There is no freezing of the status quo. If we do nothing, because one or a few legislators or a lot of legislators say no to everything that's proposed and refuse to negotiate, if we do nothing for any reason, something bad will happen. If we do nothing to protect the backcountry and the shorelines, some of the largest and most significant parcels will be cut up, be sure of it, will be developed, will be changed to the detriment of the park and to the detriment of its people. If we do nothing, the local people will continue to be denied the fuller involvement that I propose. If we do nothing, the APA membership will remain undealt with. Related issues that were part of the negotiations that have been irritants, these issues, like the question of Crane Pond Road, landfill closure, a very important subject, and how the state calculates tax payments where easements have been placed. These are all very important subjects, all difficult subjects. They will be left as they are, irritants getting worse if we do nothing. So that is not an option. You will have to take a position one way or another. You will have to say yay or nay. You will have to agree to my proposals or someone else's. If you do nothing, that is an unforgivable position, because that invites and accepts damage to everyone. I asked the people of New York State last October to consider proposals to avoid that kind of situation, to make real progress instead, to reconcile our needs and our desires reasonably and fairly, I thought, if not perfectly. Since then, there's been much speculation, occasional misrepresentation about the state's intentions in the Adirondacks. But above all, there has been very broad discussion and very solid suggestions have been offered for the improvement of the plan that I first offered. While I'm persuaded that in some specifics we may have gone too far in the beginning and amendments are warranted, must understand and recognize the emotional and financial ties of landowners to their land. Efforts to protect the character of the park ought not to ignore impacts on real families with real problems and real hopes for the future. All of us must respect and involve the residents of the Adirondacks in planning for and creating the future of the park. Let me stay with that, because that sounds right. It sounds appealing to the common sense and the common sensibilities. It is not a popular political approach. This morning's New York Times, I think, has a story about some veterans in New York City. There's only a handful of them. They're peddlers, and they're very unpopular because they're on the streets of Fifth Avenue before the great shops, and the owners of the shops and stores don't like them there. They're unseemly. They're in the way, but they're peddlers, and by law, these veterans were entitled to be there. I signed a law that said they would have to leave the streets some months ago in return for some promises from various politicians to get them jobs. And they didn't get them the jobs. And so I issued a statement through my secretary earlier this week that says I'm going to fight for a repeal of this law and put back the veterans. And the business people on Fifth Avenue are all upset, and the great newspapers are all upset. And I get phone calls saying, how can you do that? I said, because the veterans are important. Well, yes, but everybody's upset. I said, well, if every time most people were upset, you forgot the minorities, whether they're veterans or Latinos or poor people or environmentalists or 130,000 park residents, this would be a different kind of democracy. So you can't forget the 130,000 park residents. They're not important politically, as important as the millions of voters who live outside the park who would cheer you if you wiped them out and turned the whole place over to the whole state. But they're important. They're like the veterans. They're like me. I was never a majority. I come from a minority, too. My people weren't the sons and daughters of kings and power. And if I had gotten wiped out every time the majority didn't like what I was or represented or came from, I wouldn't be governor. And I haven't forgotten that, so we won't forget the 130,000 people. That means, too, we can't make an empire of the 130,000 people in the Adirondacks, but we certainly are not going to forget them. At the same time, we must respect the wisdom of Article 14 of the state constitution and its permanent protection of the forest preserve. This is a magnificent legacy belonging to all the people of the state. Now, all these general truths were respected in my original plan and the bill I proposed yesterday. More specifically, the park's backcountry, especially the large tracts that define the very character of the Adirondack Park, would be preserved by my bill. Some would be preserved by purchase for the public domain. In most cases, whether by purchase or without taking title in the state, our objective should be to assure their continued use in forest production. I put forward a way to do that, a voluntary tax abatement program which would support long-term ownership and stewardship of forest lands by private landowners, leaving the property on local tax rolls and not diminishing the ability of local residents and governments to pay for necessary local government services. I think it's a very good idea. I recommend it to you. I suggest that you look at it. The program would be reinforced by acquisition of conservation easements based on an objective analysis of the character of the land and the work of the Regional Land Acquisition Advisory Committee. Unfortunately, despite Maurice Hinchey's pushing, the legislature has not yet acted on my proposed Environmental Assistance Fund, which would provide the funds that are necessary to do these things to protect the backcountry. But we'll go back to Albany, and with Maurice's help, we will push the other legislators to produce that Environmental Assistance Fund before they leave Albany. We should also be protecting undeveloped shorelines, fostering local control in more settled areas of the park. The bill gives more local control in some areas. We should be promoting a more active, equitable role for local government in APA deliberations. We are willing to see to it that the local government, even though it represents only 130,000 people, we are willing to see to it that they have the dignity and the opportunity to be heard that those 130,000 people deserve. And we're willing to expand those rights in the law. We should be seeking opportunities to promote compatible economic development within the park. You need jobs. You need a stronger economy. There's a very strong piece in this bill in that connection. Especially projects I would recommend you look at which support the forest products industry, tourism, and community infrastructure. That's all plus for the people of the Adirondacks. There's nothing in those economic development pieces that are designed for anybody's benefit but the people in the Adirondacks. And of course, as those residents and the 130,000 people profit, that's good for all of us one way or another, but only remotely. Directly, this is designed to help in practical, tangible, dollar and cents ways the people of the area. This museum's exhibits capture both the natural splendor of the park and a way of life. And outside these walls, that splendor and that way of life, which have vanished in many parts of our country, are alive here in the Adirondacks. Again, we have an obligation to preserve both. Preserve the park for everyone, for all New Yorkers and for all those it attracts from across the country and around the world. And we have to ensure that the history and character of Adirondack communities are respected and retained, that Adirondackers can have quality education and health care, and that the residents of the Adirondacks have access to the employment and the dignity to support themselves and their families that this great state should be able to promote. In a world where nature and humanity are too often at war, New York's Adirondack experiment can show how people can thrive as part of a balanced ecosystem. Now, talking about a balanced ecosystem, let me make a special announcement. As an illustration of the potential for careful planning and cooperative action to achieve the goals of the park, I'm pleased to be joined here today by Mr. William Donlan, Chief Executive Officer of the Niagara Mohawk Corporation, to describe what I think is a very exciting transaction. Here it is in brief. Niagara Mohawk owns 2,400 acres within the park along the Hudson River between Warrensburg and Hadley. It wanted to make the wisest and best use of this land that it could, 2,400 acres. And so it worked with the state. And working with the state, with Tom Joling principally, it has come up with a comprehensive plan that shows, I think, how balance can work. The plan includes the sale of approximately 40 parcels to individual property owners. Land within the hamlets of Hadley and Lake Luzerne will be sold to individual owners or donated to those towns for public use and redevelopment. Niagara Mohawk will also convey to New York State an almost continuous 16-mile section of the beautiful Hudson River shoreline for establishment as a greenway. This will provide a diversity of recreational opportunities while protecting the scenic and natural character of the river. This announcement represents the culmination of a unique cooperative effort which has included the Department of Environmental Conservation, the Niagara Mohawk Corporation, the Adirondack Park Agency, local government, and 3 land conservation organizations, the Conservation Fund of Arlington, Virginia, the R.K. Mellon Foundation of Pittsburgh, and the Open Space Institute of New York State. On behalf, again, of 18 million people of this state, I say thank you to all of these organizations for their assistance, and especially to Bill Donlan and the Niagara Mohawk Power Corporation. I think he deserves a hand from all of us. Let me conclude. This centennial provides us all an opportunity to renew our commitment to the Adirondack Park, to rise above political slogans and partisan politics, to reaffirm our faith in this experiment of man and nature. If this anniversary is going to have a real significance, the significance that it should have, we must try hard to appreciate as fully as possible what was sacrificed and what was saved by passage of the Adirondack Park Act. Those men and women, the men and women of 100 years ago, lived in the Gilded Age, an era of industrial expansion and great economic growth. America was coming into its own as an industrial power 100 years ago. Factories and railroads were expanding. The demand for raw materials was increasing exponentially. There were fortunes to be made, quick profits, easy wealth from the Adirondacks. Much of the great forests had already been ravaged. The temptation to exploit was enormous. New wealth could have been gained. Some New Yorkers could have become very, very rich. And if the New Yorkers of 1892 had been willing to forget about us, about their descendants, They could have had more for themselves, much more exports, more raw materials, more land for development. And the worst consequences would not have come for another generation. They would not have seen the damage. They would have escaped it. They would have known only the fruits of their pillaging. Fortunately, there were New Yorkers who possessed a different vision, a vision that reached beyond their own lifetimes and opportunities for individual gain. New Yorkers who saw a beauty, a usefulness, a permanence that had far greater worth than the chance they provided for quick economic advantage. Those New Yorkers of a century ago never used the word environment, but they knew what their eyes and minds and souls taught them. They knew that if the Adirondacks were deforested, our water supplies would be endangered. They knew that we could no longer hope to survive if we went on destroying the natural surroundings that support us all. And they knew even more that the impoverishment we would suffer as a people, the resources that would be denied to those that followed them, the permanent loss of a beautiful and essential element in the creation that surrounded them, would have been an unforgivable sin. You can almost hear their voices now, here in the park and back in the room in Albany, calling us to honor their legacy, to respect their sacrifice. They exhort us to work together in support of something larger than ourselves, to protect this unique gift from God, this region like no other in the world, for its residents and for all of us. Please, let us listen to them. Let us listen to each other. And let us listen to what Lincoln called the better angels of our nature. Thank you very much for having me.